we're grateful to have Trina Hendricks speaking with us again. She did a great job in our last meeting. And if you don't know Trina, she is the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources Sportfish Coordinator. And so she's well known, and she plays a key role in developing fishing regulations and works closely with the public to help shape the future of Utah fisheries. And so I will turn the time over to Trina.
Okay, thanks. So I'm going to go old school today. No Mentimeter survey, no anything. I'm just going to read and ask for feedback. But I'll try and keep it interesting and not super boring. But you know, if you need to move it along, just feel free to move me along. If it's, you know, okay, we just need to move on. So, but these are important, so I do appreciate and to say in advance. I definitely appreciate the feedback. So I think I mentioned it, maybe not everyone was here last time though. We, the last regulation cycle we went through, we recognized that there was a need to get the proposed regulations to our core angler groups before we sent it out to the statewide survey, just so people knew what was coming, because otherwise they don't hear about it until about a month, 2 weeks before the RAC meetings, and they just didn't feel, the people that we heard from didn't feel that was long enough. So this is all part of that process. So I came to you guys a couple months ago with the Mentimeter survey, asked you, do you support, do you not support, have some of that information, basically a list of the final proposal that we're going to take to the statewide survey. So you guys are kind of my last stop. Then I'm going to work with our social scientists to draft the wording for that statewide survey, and it'll be a randomly selected group of about 25,000 anglers, and we'll have like a set percentage of resident, non-resident, male, female, and the different counties represented. So those are the groups that we try to make sure are represented, so we have a good representation of all of those groups. And yeah, other than that, it'll be a randomly selected group of 25,000. So if you do get something in mid-May from Division of Wildlife asking you to take the survey, you are lucky, and definitely it might take a long time. I'm not gonna lie, it's a list of we've got 3 solid pages onto a 4th. No, I guess it's only 2 pages onto a 3rd. So maybe it's not bad. It's not as bad as last time. So I'm just gonna go through starting with statewide and then region by region. We don't really have anything from the southeastern region, except like cleaning up a rule change. Or cleaning up a rule with a minor change. So I'm just gonna go to the other 4 and then statewide. And then I'll just take feedback if anyone has any issues, concerns, or if you just have questions too. Let's talk. So first, on a statewide basis, we're gonna move some species around on what's called our collection, importation, and possession list. So that's basically the list that says it's a prohibited species, it's a controlled species. It basically dictates what you can do with that species, how easy is it for you to possess that species and move it around and that sort of thing. For the most part, you know, you're really not allowed to move fish or any other species around without a COR, right? You have to have some kind of permit from us. But like some people are able to possess for educational purposes, that sort of thing. So we're gonna move burbot from the prohibited list to the controlled list, just to make that more in line with, yes, it's an unwanted species, but we also kind of encourage fishing for it, right? At the gorge through like the burbot bash. So just to make things more consistent. We're gonna add zander to the prohibited list to ensure consistency throughout the CIP. It's kind of just cleaning stuff up. And then I asked you guys about triploid grass carp, if you're okay with moving that from the prohibited to the controlled list. So we are gonna move forward with that. That seemed pretty well supported. That's because we do stock triploid grass carp into waters where we need vegetation control. Unlike common carp, the grass carp actually eats the vegetation and will actually help control vegetation. We are going to move forward with, it's a clarification, the spearfishing for black bass, you know, just having it open at 6 a.m. on the 4th Saturday in June. It doesn't specify the time, so that's just cleaning things up. And then the final statewide one is kind of I think it's kind of cool. We are going to we kind of asked in general, like, how do you feel about having a native non-game fish be converted to a sport fish? That was pretty well supported from all of the groups that we asked. And so we're gonna move forward with moving native non-game fishes, except for Utah chub, we'll just leave that on the non-game list so people can do whatever they want. You know, there's a lot of bow fishing and, maybe not bow fishing, sorry, underwater spear fishing, and just a lot of flexibility with Utah chub. So we're gonna go ahead and leave that, and then all of the other native non-game fishes, we're gonna convert to sport fish, and just have catch and release regulations. In a couple of years, I think you'll see us kind of shifting to promoting slams and things like that with our native fishes to just try and increase opportunity on the landscape. There's a lot of things you could do with some of these species. Some maybe are more palatable as a sport fish for others, but if you go to the eastern United States, there's like mini slam, you know, there's like mini, what is that called? Microfishing? Sorry. And they do slams for microfishing, and they promote non-game, you know, as sport fish everywhere, and it's just a lot more common. And there's really no reason, you know, if you need to restrict harvest, then maybe that's one reason, but you could still allow catch and release, right? So there's really no reason to have this, you know, this separation between native and sport fish. So just opening up opportunity, that opens up a whole other world of locations, really. Any questions on statewide and what we're planning to do there? Okay, I'm just gonna move into the central region next. So there's just two, one Provo River Delta, and then the other was Utah Lake. So Provo River Delta was opening that to spearfishing for carp, white bass, and northern pike. We're gonna ask those separately, the questions separately, because there was a difference in, like there was definitely more approval from groups like yourself for carp, and then for white bass there was a little bit more, and then for northern pike was a little bit less. So we're gonna ask those separately and just see what the random survey says. We would maintain the carp restrictions there, and then the nighttime closures. And then on Utah Lake, allow bow fishing for northern pike. And that is, we clearly want harvest on that particular species. That's an invasive, unwanted fish. So, any questions on the central region? Any concerns? Okay. Northeastern region, all of this is the same as what you heard before, except I do have more specific information at starvation on the walleye. So at Bruff, we are going to add that to the list of locations where you can use perch and perch parts for baits. That's just, they've been in there for forever. We should have done that a long time ago. Sometimes you just overlook things. Then at Pelican Lake, we will increase the bluegill, we'll propose increasing the bluegill limit to 50, and then going to a no limit for black bullhead there. So that was, the no limit was more supported than the muskill. There wasn't much support for that. So we will go with that.
Have the sizes changed in those requirements?
The sizes for bluegill?
For bluegill and walleye, like you were saying that we're trying to get it up to 50. Is that a certain size limit?
So at Pelican Lake for the bluegill, we are removing that size restriction that's currently there, okay, and just saying, please harvest, because they are kind of stunted in there now. It just, we weren't successful. That's the bottom line. We just need harvest to get those little guys out of there. So yeah, there's no size restriction on that anymore, or there won't be, assuming that all is accepted. So it's starvation, allowing underwater spearfishing for largemouth, smallmouth, and walleye. So we're gonna add walleye to that list and maintain that spawning closure, so it'd be the same dates, so as not to make things confusing. Allow bow fishing for all species, including a spawning closure for the bass and the walleye. And then the walleye limit would be similar to, I think I did mention kind of an example, but the final would be 20 walleye less than 15 inches, and then no harvest between 15.01 inches and 20, and then only one over 20 inches. So the main thing with that is we aren't seeing fish move from the 15 to 20 size class into the larger fish as frequently. We do see it, but it's just not happening as frequently. But we see, like, Natalie has a graph, and I did want to mention Josue is interested in coming to talk to you guys. So, and he can tell you more about what's going on at the starvation fishery and give you like all of the details. But what they're seeing, she's just got this graph where year after year after year, those walleye are just stacked in there. Clearly, like the main size class is that 10 to 14 inches, and they really just seem like that's just the big pulse, and it doesn't move, right? Normally you would see, in a growing population, you'd see like the big bump at the smaller size classes, and you'd see the little bump, and you'd see it through time moving, and you just can't really see that, you know? So they're just not growing like they should be, and that should support that growth. That they're actually going to couple with a little bit of removal, not necessarily active removal like we did, I think it was in the early 2000s. And I think that there was a lot of concern there. It's not gonna be that kind of removal where they're actively going out, netting specifically for removal, but they are going to, they're not gonna worry as much about returning fish, walleye to the water during their netting. So if it's netting that they're looking at, you know, spring and fall, like they're typically gonna do, they're gonna remove those fish. Because we only see 15% harvest on that walleye population, and that's just not enough with the modeling work that Josue's been doing. It's not enough to get that growth like we wanna see. But even up to like, I think she was saying about 3%, we can get 3% additional through DWR removals, that actually can help grow that population again. So Josue could tell you a little bit more about that, but that's just kind of the upshot, kind of what we're thinking. And yeah, the thing to think about is that will impact tournaments. They're aware of that. So something to think about, I guess, as you're talking tournaments. And they're gonna work with, you know, there's the Walleye Classic over there.
September, right? Starvation Walleye Classic.
Yeah, and I'm sure she's, and I guess it used to be Kurt, I guess, right? And I don't know if it still is.
It's not Kurt this year anymore, yeah.
I'm sure that Natalie's on that and talking with those guys. And I guess it wouldn't be this year, right? It'd be next year if it goes through. So just things, yeah, that's like the trickle down effect, right? Where it's like, that's gonna be a bummer potentially, but there's definitely things that can be done. So hopefully they can come to agreement. But that is, if we wanna see that population growing again, I think they've got a good formula there based on that, the parameters from that population, right? It's not from some other population. Like Willard is growing great for the first 3 years, and then it seems like they get picked off. So you'll see another regulation based on the variables of that water body. So I think it's a good plan moving forward, and we just need to make sure that we're communicating that. And like I said, Josue would love to come talk to you guys. So I don't know, maybe after not the May one, but maybe after
Perhaps
that.
June. Thank you.
Okay. Any concerns, comments on that?
I may have missed it, but for the 10-inch, 14-inch walleye, the overabundance, it's a lack of food supply. What's your thoughts on that?
They just, I mean, it's not a terrible problem to have. They just have consistent year classes. You know, a lot of times you might see like a year class failure where you just lose a lot of individuals, and they just have very successful year classes that just maintain throughout. And yeah, there's nothing really that really reduces that population, and so now they just have a lot of competition in that size class because there's so many of them.
Could you explain about the fee being paid for spearing carp, how that works?
The fee for spearing.
Aren't they?
That's at
Utah Lake.
Utah Lake?
Yeah, he's talking about the carp, $3 a fish, the carp harvest on Utah Lake.
I'm a peon. I'm on a need-to-know basis, and apparently I don't know.
I will tell you
I'm
that
sorry.
I have posted information about that on our Facebook page, and I'll talk to you after the meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So typically when I can't answer something, I just make a note, I can talk to those guys, and then I get the information back to David, and so we can do that. Sorry,
There's information on the Utah Lake Authority, what pages?
What is it?
They're paying for carp removal, and so.
The state grant, there's a state grant?
Yes, and so.
So how do you verify the ones you shoot?
I think you have to turn in the carp.
You have to turn them in?
Yes. Yeah.
So what do you
But
do
there are
out?
people who are turning in 300 carp at $3 a fish, so, yeah. And it's tiered, the pricing is tiered, so, but, it's all available on Utah Lake Authority.
Okay.
Or I could put you in contact with Heather that we have a partnership with.
How dead carp are
That's a-
Well, so, and that's important, and I know Trina knows this, the carp are really tearing up Utah Lake because of the way they get off the bottom. So they're causing all kinds of ecological problems with Utah Lake, that's why they don't come out.
Yeah, so we are, the DWR is doing some removal work, and that's what I've been hearing about. I didn't realize that the Utah Lake Authority was offering that. We didn't get that, I didn't get that. So. Good to know, thanks for bringing that up. Okay. Oh, and there is one more for northeastern region, so the lower Stillwater ponds, I don't know if you guys know where that is, maybe just bring that up. It's up, oh. So like if you were to go to Upper Stillwater Dam, maybe, see if that, yeah, go to Stillwater Dam in Utah, maybe that'll help. I wonder why it's not coming up. So, Rock Creek?
Is it Rockport or Deer Creek?
No, it's the lower Stillwater ponds in the northeastern region, it's on Rock Creek. But it's downstream from Upper Stillwater Dam. So I thought, maybe it's up, you did Upper Stillwater.
Is it in Cache County or where?
It is in Duchesne County.
Oh, Duchesne.
There it is. You have to say Upper Stillwater. So, and then if you zoom out and then go downstream, you'll see, it's a really cool area, it really is.
Yeah.
So if you follow, go this way.
So have you?
Further, oh, no, sorry, I don't see ponds, but it's down in the valley. Oh, this is them, sorry. So it's like this pond complex, they're actually connected and they're connected to Rock Creek, but they're separated by screens, so each one of those ponds is managed differently. Like this big one is like the family fishery, this is a brown trout fishery, you've got grayling in one, I think, and tiger trout in another, and brook trout in another, cutthroat in another, so they're managed each differently, but there was some concern in the last creel that there's a bit of overharvest, so, you know, it's a statewide 4 trout limit, so they're gonna reduce that to 2 here, which I think it was pretty well accepted during that creel survey. It should help keep some fish in the water a little bit longer. It's a really cool place, it's a long way from you guys, but if you can ever make it out, it's really pretty up there.
What's that place called again?
It's called the Lower Stillwater Ponds Complex. So you go over to, what is that, Mountain Home?
Oh, in Wyoming?
No,
Down there.
I always get confused, there's Mountain,
There's Mountain Home in Idaho.
Yeah, and there's a mountain, something
There's
in
Mountain
Wyoming
Home
too.
here.
Mountain Home. So if you go over to Mountain Home and then go over here and dive off the
Close to
hillside.
Altoona.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah, you gotta go straight up north from Duchesne, it's a long way. And there's no shortcut, there's no getting through any other way, so. But it is a cool place, the Rock Creek. Rock Creek was a really great brown trout fishery, and then Upper Rock Creek was a great cutthroat fishery, and that, there was that fire through there that kinda filled in some pools, kinda reduced the habitat, so it's not as good fishing in Rock Creek. But there is still some good fishing that hasn't been impacted by that fire and runoff. So anyway, if you ever get a chance to get up there, you can get away from people a little bit, so. Okay, that was it for the northeastern region. Any comments, questions? Okay, then moving on to the northern region, so we have Bear Lake, Manaway, Willard Bay, Causey, and Newton. And I think all of these, you guys heard all of the specifics, except Willard Bay, I've got a little bit more specific information. Except maybe not Bear Lake, actually. So Bear Lake, we had a meeting with the biologists, and we're actually seeing an increase in Utah suckers there. And some of the research is showing that they, according to like the carbon nitrogen ratios, they may be consuming more eggs than what originally we thought. And so we have some concerns with sculpin. And so it's not like we're trying to whack at all the Utah suckers or anything like that, but we thought maybe it would be cool to allow underwater spearfishing and bow fishing for a Utah sucker. And we'll maintain like a closure probably during the spawning season for them, which is spring season, but just try to encourage maybe a little bit more harvest, because it has been an increasing population, which is it's kind of an interesting trend. So you might not have heard that one, I don't think I brought that up, but the Manaway Reservoir, We're gonna move, that was pretty well supported, reducing the bluegill from 50 to 15. So that was a pretty big reduction. I think there was a question last time too about, you know, is it really anglers that are the problem, or bass? Is it largemouth predation being part of the problem? And their evidence shows that they are getting picked off at a certain size, at the larger size. So that's an angler thing. So they are gonna move forward with that. Willard Bay, 6 fish limits, 6 walleye limit. They must be at least 18 inches, only one may exceed 24. So that is a totally different, right, than our starvation proposal. Again, it's based on the variables that we're seeing at that water body, right? So like mortality at that water body, angler exploitation at that water body, and growth. And so the growth here is phenomenal. Those fish are about 3 years old. And so we're just trying to protect them until they actually can get a spawn off, is what they're trying to do there. And there's, Taylor's probably got a host of other things he's trying to accomplish with that.
Taylor met with us last month and he had a really in-depth.
He's a smart dude, huh?
Which is available on our YouTube page.
Right, yeah, if you have any questions,
He's
go
a
there.
very smart dude.
Yeah, he's a very smart dude, for sure. Kazi, there's that bonus limit for kokanee, that was pretty well supported, so we'll move forward with that. And then Newton revert to the statewide tiger muskie regulation.
Just quick question. So I'm assuming no change on the wiper limits proposed for Willard?
No.
Still 3? Okay.
Yep. Okay, so any questions or comments for northern region? Okay.
Well, I do have a kind of weird one. So he's, the guy last month said that they deliberately planted, shad in Willard for the walleye, or for the wiper, right? And I was wondering, what do they have in Jordanelle? Did they put them in there also for them to feed on? Cause they put the wiper in Jordanelle.
I think the shad went in for walleye, 'cause I think those were in there before wiper ever went in. 'Cause that's a more recent program. The shad have been in there for quite a while.
Okay.
So, the food base at Jordanelle, though, to answer your question, it seems like that is yellow perch right now. Actually, it's zooplankton, so I.
And that would make sense, cause the yellow perch have gone way down, like this, like, can't catch anything of any size.
And it sounds like from because we just had the management team meeting for that, like a lot of the fish are actually just relying on zooplankton as well. And so we think there might be a little bit of competition going on there, so I think that might be what the biologists are really considering. How do we either increase forage or decrease the number of mouths that we're feeding there?
Trina, if they're relying on zooplankton, then was that affecting their size and growth rate?
And I think that they're seeing it mostly in the bass population. So that's the biggest concern right now, because that is a popular fishery. People want to see those fish grow better. So, yes. And we're working with the Bureau of Reclamation right now to get some habitat structures in. And so I think Chris Crockett maybe came and he might have mentioned some of that. So there's a pretty rigorous permitting process, and Tyler has been really trying to work with them, and I'm sure he's doing a great job. It just takes a long time. He had funding this year, but I think they're gonna cancel that funding, and he's got another proposal in for our next fiscal year, so we'll just hopefully get that approved so we can move forward, because that will really help. That's aimed at increasing just surface area for phytoplankton to grow on, and so all the macroinvertebrates, zooplankton will probably be increased around those areas, and then obviously little fish are gonna like to hunker down, so around those areas. Yeah.
So I know this is a crazy question, but I've heard off and on that these big surf boats that cause the big waves have been having some effect on the food that's available for the fish. Any research on that?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with research, like direct impact to the food base necessarily, but definitely seeing some of probably the same videos, right? So it does increase erosion and nutrient input into the lake, which then has a lot of other impacts, right? So kind of that probably trickling down like through the food web, but I don't see I don't see them going away from, well, we're not gonna restrict those boats, right? We are talking with state parks, and outdoor recreation about trying to have a few more wakeless areas for anglers to fish. So it's not gonna improve water quality or any of those impacts, but hopefully it provides a safe space and a better space for people to fish. And we've got like a list of 6 waters we're working with state parks on. Jordanelle being one of them. So the biologists are kind of identifying what they do. In a perfect world, what would you like to see? Deer Creek was one of them, and some of it's just extending the no wake zone. Like I think Deer Creek right now, the north end is a no wake zone, at least maybe in high water, so it'd be just extending that further down. So sometimes it's as simple as that, and just trying to put some buoys out and restrict. But again, that's more of trying to protect spawning fish to a certain extent, and also just making a better experience for people who aren't creating huge waves and have to suffer the consequences of others' huge waves.
I have a question for you, and I know this is a very popular question online. What about just getting the wakeboarders to follow the law, staying 200 feet off the shoreline, staying away from anchored boats?
Going into wakeless areas. How about that?
Pretty popular
How about
conversation
that?
online.
Yeah, so with any luck, let's be hopeful, right? There is that, I don't even know what the name of the law was, but there was it's a boater course, right? A boater education course. They're pairing that with the AIS course. So you don't have to spend any more time online, but it does make sure that if you're gonna operate a boat, at least you had to sit through this course and think about your actions behind the wheel of a boat, right? So hopefully with any luck, people who maybe never thought about not being a jerk out there, maybe they'll have to think about, maybe there are other people out on the water.
We could make it really easy. We just need to issue paintball guns to fishing boats, and all you'd have to do is pull over the boats that are covered with
the red
paint
spots, yeah.
Right.
as they're leaving the lake and give them a ticket.
Yeah, if your paintball gun can only fire, what is it, yeah.
50 feet.
That's
Yep.
how close they come.
Piece of cake. I am not going to claim one way or the other, but,
Bonus points if you could hit people inside the boat.
I'm not gonna say it doesn't make sense. It makes sense.
I'm sorry, it got us off track, sorry.
Yeah, so boating issues, it was interesting. I wasn't sure what to expect, but when we met with them, the individuals that we talked to were very interested in talking about, not necessarily some of those videos out of Minnesota and like the erosion and even some of the recommendations, right? Not allowing them to go in, like, to be at full speed if it's shallower than 20 feet, which I think is a common regulation that you're seeing out east. Not interested in that, but just trying to make sure we're providing better experiences for all of our users. So, but starting small, right? So hopefully you see more of a public effort or public, I guess, outreach request this year as we move through the process and into next year. Because it's, it starts with just conversations internally, and then we're going to the Voter Access Committee, and then we're gonna go to, then we'll go to a public forum, right? Like open
I
houses.
know at one of these meetings, someone from your organization told us that even under 20 feet, that underwater cams were showing them turning the bottom over. So they're in closer than 20 feet, they're turning the bottom over, their weight is, so, yeah, so. Keep them away, keep them out.
We'll do what we can.
Yeah.
That's about all I can say. But it's definitely on our radar. We're gonna start small and see what.
Now, there seems to be 2 camps with 2 very different opinions here. There's the fisherman camp and then the wakeboard camp.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting, the crossover, you wouldn't necessarily think it, but with the angling community, right? So the angling community and the boater community are almost, they're not one and the same necessarily, but there's a pretty strong showing for both when you go to these like American Fish and Wildlife Agency meetings, like the AFWA, the WAFWA, the North American Wildlife Management. So there's a lot of, when you're in the fisheries management group in that meeting, the boating access or the boater community is there, and it's not just that, it's the retail folks, and they've got a pretty big voice and a seat at the table, and so there's a lot of like, how do we make this work? How do we make sure we play nice in the sandbox and all get along? So, yeah, because there's a lot of funding, I think, too, that goes to things like DJ or federal aid, just from voter sales. And so there's all kinds of things you gotta think about when you're on that side, but we're trying to play nice, but also trying to make sure everyone has a good experience while they're out there. Because a lot of times, it's not. And I guess I would encourage our angler survey, the statewide angler survey, people said that it was like 10% of people responded that they've changed their behavior based on crowding.
You could fish Monday through Thursday, there's no problem.
But did you used to fish on the weekend and now you've changed?
Yeah, Saturdays suck.
Yeah, so like that's a behavior change, right? And so in our statewide survey, it's like there's very few people changing their behavior. I have a really hard time believing that. So I think maybe we need to be a little bit more clear about what we mean in that question. Like, have you shifted to, I only go on Wednesdays now, you know, not everyone can do that. Or do I only?
There's a lot more of those wake buoys out there now. Like in Wallsburg Bay, there's one.
Yeah. Or, I think what we'll probably do is, I think I went out after Memorial Day last year. I'm never doing that again. Memorial Day and Labor Day, they can have it, right? And
4th of July.
yeah, they can
Once you
have
fish
it.
at night, you're all right.
Or, yeah.
That touches your point, we're avoiding the lake fishing on the holidays because they overtake the lake and
Right.
it's, for some of these guys in smaller boats, it's just not safe. Right? It's not safe.
And when they choose no one, they've made a choice, right?
Right.
When they say everyone can recreate,
Right.
then they've made a choice, and yeah, so
One-
trying to.
One group overpowers the other, they absolutely made that choice,
Yeah, absolutely, so it was cool to see that they were receptive, even if we have to start small, like, gotta start somewhere, right? So, we'll get there though. I don't know if we'll get where everyone wants us to be.
The biggest frustrating thing I get from that is that I can sit and watch them. All the fishermen are along the shoreline fishing, even the guys trolling, pretty close to shoreline. You have a big open lake in the middle, and those skiers come right down along there next to you, just to show you what they're doing.
Yeah.
And it's just like, why? You have open water out there, go over there.
I think I know why.
Why?
Because they're interested in speed and their relation to speed. And if you're out in the middle of the lake, they can't tell what they're doing,
Yeah.
but when you go past, when they go past the shoreline, now I'm moving, that's what I
Right,
think.
that's a good thought,
Yeah.
so.
Could be.
You got a
It's still
reference.
annoying.
I told a fishing buddy of mine, I was gonna go to the DI and buy a big camera. Didn't even have to work, and I was just gonna stand up and act like I was taking pictures. Like their kids or their wives, as they're told them, oh, I thought that's why you came over here.
Right.
I don't know why you were the one here.
Yeah, so, yeah, I bet that's a good thought, it
We took
probably.
you way off the weeds.
I know, now I'm like, okay, where am I? Okay. No, it's a hot topic, it really is, and it's something that's on our radar as well. Alright, so that was the northern region, southern region, going back there. So the one, Lake Powell, I think, was where all of the groups ran by, there was a little bit of, it was maybe split, I think, on that smallmouth bass and lifting the smallmouth bass regulation. So lifting the spawning closure for underwater spearfishing, that was Dan's proposal. So largemouth, they would still have the spawning closure, smallmouth not, and he's pretty adamant that there could be a lot more harvest in there. So he wanted to move forward with that, so we are gonna move forward with that. We're also gonna move forward with the set line fishing, so set line fishing would be allowed at Lake Powell. That was kind of split too, but I think I worded it incorrectly, so.
Sorry, but what exactly is set line fishing?
Set line
like a
fishing
trot
is,
line?
yeah, like you just have a line with, I think we've allowed up to 8 hooks, and it's anchored, and, you know, you've gotta have a tag with your name and information, but
And you leave it, come back and harvest it?
it's like 48 hours? No more than 48, you have to check every 48 hours.
Well, that's exciting with as low as the lake is getting, we were just there last week, and then have to dodge out those two.
Yeah, so that, so, and that would be, I think, catfish is typically what's caught on a set line like that, but it's not selective, right? It could.
Whatever, right, it's gonna have a lot of bycatch.
Yeah. But most of I think all of the limits would allow for that, don't they?
Look, Dave, there's a way for you to catch a fish at Lake Powell. Set it, forget it.
And then allowing bow fishing for striped bass, cause so down at Lake Powell, it was all about his needing harvest on certain species, so encouraging that.
So, another question, I'm sorry, but,
That's fine.
since you brought up striped bass down there, we know how the population is kind of struggling because of the lack of flories, right? And we're hearing stories about, at one end, about they were literally starving to death, they were getting these incredibly skinny striped bass. I mean, is that still, do you know any information about it?
I haven't heard the latest. I think the latest I heard is maybe a year ago, and they were doing better, right? Because it's all based on the shad population, and shad were doing better. But I think the expectation was like a decline, but I don't know what they're seeing this year. But yeah, speaking of, I did want to bring up too, Lake Powell water levels, and you've probably been hearing about Flaming Gorge and how they're going to be sending that water down. Originally it was 500,000 acre feet. That's what they did, what, 2-3 years ago? And that has increased, and the last I heard just today was like 650,000 acre feet up to 1 million. And they're gonna tell everyone, I guess, in the meeting, the Flaming Gorge work group meeting on Tuesday. I think that's when we'll hear what the actual number is and how they're gonna release that water, and how long it's gonna take. There's like a lot of assumptions I could make at this point, right? Like, I wouldn't think that they'd want to bypass, so you'll probably get 4,000 CFS, but it might be less, depending on how quickly they want to get that water down. But it's all about keeping Lake Powell water levels.
There were some reports as well that they were going to limit the release from Powell.
Yes, that is.
In the past years, they've sent water down to Meade, and apparently Powell was low enough that they were saying they would not do that this year. Do you have any information about that?
I don't have specifics. I've just heard that is the case, and it's all about keeping Powell at 3,500. And 3,525 is their oh crap level, where it, warning, right? We're getting close to that hydropower level, so like 35, it seems like a compromise even at that, but it's all about keeping it from going below that, so, yeah.
So what's that going to do both to the gorge and what's it going to do to the Green River? Is it going to be just a gradual release all year so that the Green River is just going to be at spring runoff stage all summer long, or what's that going to look like?
Yeah, we'll have to see. It probably won't be spring runoff, right? So their releases are, it's that 4,000-ish CFS gets you, that's the maximum power plant capacity. Anything above that, up to like 8,800, I want to say, is like the bypass. So I'm assuming that chunk, if they do any of that, it'll just be for spring peaking flows, and that would be temporary. They would at least come back to 4,000 or less. Again, this is all kind of assumptions, like it's probably hear more on Tuesday in that meeting. But there was also talk about, after the spring peak releases is done, like maybe you get 2 weeks of that high flow, then it would probably drop to like a base flow. It could be down to like 2,000 or 3,000. Typical base flow for a dry year is gonna be about 800 CFS. So I'm thinking it's gonna be closer to the 4,000, but I don't know. But I think that boaters down below, the guides don't want to see it at 4,000. That's a difficult flow for them, I think. 2,600 sounds like it's better for them, and then the rafters I think will be just fine no matter what. The fishery, it seems like what we've seen with the fishery there on the green is that it does fine. It's just the fishing can go downhill when they're constantly moving it up and down, right? Like the daily peaking or like the double peaking, and then the ramp up, especially like a ramp up. So that ramp up is going to be a struggle for folks who are trying to fish. I'm not saying avoid it, I'm just saying you might have lower catch rates because it disturbs all the macroinvertebrates, and so the fish and playing and eat, and they don't necessarily want to go for your fly at that time. But then once it stabilizes, and even like daily peaking after that, just like power plant peaking isn't as big of a deal. It's especially that initial ramp up that really disturbs the macros and really like tanks the fishing for like a day or so. So that'll be interesting to see. The thing that we're most concerned about, we got two, it's access. And the last I heard, it feels like hearsay, right? But this was from Don Wiley, who was attending the water meeting and he heard from the Utah DNR person who's like, you know, they're in these conversations. They don't expect ramps in Utah they don't expect the water level to get down below the ramps in Utah. Wyoming, it's a different story. We'll have to see. The problem we saw last time is that sediment just builds up, right? So they struggled with clearing sediment off of the ramps to make them accessible. They were able to keep up. So hopefully what they did last time is still accessible, maybe a little bit of backhoe work as the water levels decline. But once we get to that level that we were at 2-3 years ago when they did it before, that's when there's gonna be massive amounts of sediment. It makes it real hard to launch, especially at like an Antelope Flats. So right now we are in discussions with the Northeastern region, just like how can we re-jury your work plan so that you guys can keep a better eye on this stuff? Because the Forest Service, they don't have a lot of employees right now. They don't have a lot of extra time. So I think they could use some help. So can we maybe send seasonals out to take a look at what's going on as the water levels decline so that we can get the word out? And I think what we're gonna do is use that Fish Utah app. So if you're on the Northeastern region fishing report, you'll probably get updates regularly as we post updates there as it gets lower. So that, and then the Kokanee run. So we relied very heavily on the Kokanee run last fall. Did great, right? So especially strawberries, Kokanee run didn't do that great. It didn't turn out for us. So we were heavily relying on that Sheep Creek run. It was like over 2 million eggs, which usually that's strawberries' job. So that's a huge bummer because in that Sheep Creek Bay, it's just this huge alluvial fan going in there. It's not necessarily a really well-defined channel. Those fish stack up in there and they're looking for cues to get up in there anyway when there's normal flow. You know, they're just looking for increased flow to get up in there. Now with declining water levels, it could be, I know I'm preparing for the worst that we're not gonna have a run at Sheep Creek. Can we do other things? Can we collect in reservoir? We've tried it before with limited success, but we haven't been put in this bind before, right? Where it's like, well, we don't have any other options. So maybe that will, maybe we'll be able to figure out something a little bit better where we can still take from Flaming Gorge, because that contributes statewide. So we'll have to see. Those are the two things that we're mostly worried about. The other thing I think that we saw last time is that fish were in different places, because it probably looks very different under the water, you know, if you're a fish and it's like it's now 26 feet down or whatever. They're going to be in different places, so people might have to move around a little bit more looking for fish. That's the other thing. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just, we're not going to know. Last time we were doing a krill survey when this happened, so we heard from a lot of people that were very upset. And we didn't know what to tell them. It took a while, right, to figure out where fish were and that sort of thing. So it's gonna be a learning curve, I think. So anyway, any questions on Flaming Gorge? Any of that? Okay. Southern region, I covered Lake Powell, and then Navajo Lake was seemed like everyone was in support of changing the tiger muskie limit to 1 tiger muskie any size, just to be in line with state, with the state tiger muskie management plan. And then pike limit at DMAD, Sevier River, Gunnison Bend, and Redmond. So that was increasing to, I think we asked limit 20, limit 40, any size, and there's just not a lot of pike in there. So we're gonna see about going up to the 40 northern pike any size. And they're just not very big in there. So I think that what was supported by the groups that we ran it through, you guys included, was closer to the, I think you guys wanted to see the 20. But really it's all about just trying to encourage harvest. And there's just not fish of any size in those areas. And then on Oak Creek Lake and Donkey Lake on the boulders, we did ask whether folks would support a decrease in that trout limit, and from 16 down. And it seemed like people were split between 4 and 8, and so it was well supported, just a decrease, but the number was kind of up in the air. So we're gonna put it out to the statewide survey, just would you be okay with 4, would you be okay with 8, and just see what folks say. So we will decrease those, but not sure what that will look like yet. And then we're looking at changing the dates on some of the Boulder Mountain waters. So Bulberry Lakes, Honeymoon, Long Willow Bottom Reservoir, Pacer Lake, Pine Creek, Round Willow Bottom, Scout Lake, Solitaire Lake. So the current closure basically opens the 3rd Saturday of April, closes again November 1st. So we're gonna scooch those up a few weeks and back. So allowing more opportunity, more fishing. Access has been pretty good in there at those times in recent years, and no concerns about those fisheries. So it would be opening on April 1st and closing on December 1st. So that would be about an increase of seven weeks of access. So those were the regulations. Most of those you heard before, we're just moving forward with them. Again, there were a few that I know y'all weren't in support of in general, but our biologists were really adamant that we needed harvest on those locations, on those species. So, yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
So just a clarification on all of these, so these are all, at this point, we'd say they're probable that these regulations are gonna go into effect, because you said it's gonna go up for the survey and public commentary, but this is kind of where things are leaning right now, correct? Is that
Yeah,
right?
so they'll all go to the survey, and if, in general, the random selection of people that respond, if they are in support, then that's what'll go to the RACs. So the RAC meetings are, I think it's the last week of August for the central and northern region, and then the first week of September for the other 3. So that is another opportunity to provide comments, if someone's strongly opposed to something. But yeah, we'll do a press release once we get the survey results back, and we've kind of got the presentation developed, and we're getting prepared to go to the rep. We'll get it out there. I don't know the exact timing, but really it's only July and August is really the only window there. So you'll see everything that'll be going to the RACs, and our RAC schedule is online, so you could also look at those if you really wanted to come and be opposed or support too. You can come and support us. So, yeah, does that clarify? But in my experience though, yeah, I don't think it's our wording. I think when we do our wording and the questions, we try to provide a little bit of context so people understand why we're proposing something. Some people see that as leading, I think. So we're gonna work a little bit more closely with our social scientists this year to get maybe some better wording. We also, though, we break it out because we make sure that we get people's county residency information and all of that. So we can break it out by a specific water body, right? Like Pelican Lake, anyone who lives in Uinta County probably is fishing that a lot more often than someone who's down in Juah County or something like that. So we can kind of take a look, and if there's a difference there, we take that into account. But in my experience, yeah, it doesn't seem like people are overly opposed, unless they're just overly opposed, right? Like there's just certain things that just trigger people's responses. Usually only 1 or 2 though.
Good luck.
Thanks for your feedback, appreciate it. We can either do questions, or I can talk about kokanee, or if you guys have more club business.
You said the word kokanee, you may never get out of here.
Oh boy. So it's not a presentation, but I did want to talk about our kokanee plan, if you guys are amenable, because we're wrapping it up. So we've increased the stocking of kokanee. So we've gone from 2 waters where we were actively stocking kokanee every year to 8 or 9. I think the total number of kokanee waters is about 17, so a lot. Just relying on natural reproduction and maybe even some that aren't even Moon Lake. No one goes, they just feed Lake, right? So, but yeah, we've increased their stocking of kokanee. At the same time, we've seen an increase in people targeting kokanee. It's up to about 16% of anglers nowadays. It was one of the more popular species, like the most popular species in one way that we asked the question in the Blue Ribbon Economic Survey. So it's definitely top 4 though. And so, yeah, it's a very important species. We started increasing our, the traps, right? And like taking eggs from Strawberry and Flaming Gorge more regularly, more consistency, more eggs, and moving them around the state. And then we started seeing shortages and decided that we really need to talk about kokanee and how much we can really do with them as a species, especially given their very specific requirements, right? So we got a group together. It was just an internal group, all the biologists, like a representative sample, not all the biologists dealing with kokanee, but we started looking at, well, I guess I'll give you the 3 goals that we had were to ensure equitable, prioritize, and efficient distribution of stock kokanee across the state. So a big thing about what we did was just talk about, okay, where are we gonna stock kokanee in the future? And if we're gonna have a new kokanee water, we better make sure that they're gonna survive. They have a good chance of natural reproduction, because we can't always, poor Taylor, you guys met him last month, so he started a new kokanee population, and then he didn't get kokanee for that water for a couple of years because we had shortages. And so if this is our reality, then we better be darn sure where we want to put them and to stock those resources. So we had a lot of discussion surrounding that. We wanted to understand our kokanee habitat requirements of each water body, and where feasible and appropriate, improve conditions, enhance spawning, recruitment, and survival of both the naturally reproduced and the stocked kokanee. And then establish baseline data and continue to assess angler preferences, expectations, satisfaction, and understanding of kokanee management. So basically, like trying to have like a well-oiled kokanee machine in the state where we understand our anglers and what they are seeing and what they're wanting. We're communicating more effectively with them. We're stocking them in the right places at the right quantities, and then we're also more knowledgeable about what's happening to each of them in each of our waters. So the things that and I won't go into tons and tons of detail because it could get really boring probably, but just in general. So we're planning to we have established minimum criteria for the fishery and habitat. So for any new kokanee fisheries, it has to be, some of it's, pretty basic stuff, right? Like there should probably be a boat ramp. Most of our kokanee anglers fish from a boat. You can shore fish, but it's not as much fun, it's not as popular, there's just not as many, right? So some of them are pretty obvious, but then it's also things like, we should probably evaluate the inflows. Is there spawning habitat, or can we get them spawning in reservoirs? You need like natural springs coming in, it seems like, is where they like to spawn in places like Flaming Gorge. So do you have the substrate, do you have the inflows, do you have the zooplankton and productivity, do you have the depth so that they can survive through the summer? So it's kind of just like a checklist evaluation. It gives a score for biologists to be able to evaluate. And when they run through that, there's maybe one more water in the state. There's really not that many. So probably won't see a ton more waters than new kokanee populations. We'll probably just try and focus on where we have them.
Is there a ranking of reservoirs with the most density of the population of kokanee? Ranking?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Well, of all the reservoirs you've stocked, which ones have the most plentiful kokanee?
Oh, so let's see, do I have that information? Well, we basically identified like a management concept for each one. So like Blind Lake down in the southern region is a forage and an opportunity water. So to me, even though I don't know like the exact situation, that to me says they're plentiful, but they're probably not very big. So places like Causey, East Canyon, Electric, Fish Lake, Smith and Morehouse, State Line, those are all opportunity waters, so they're gonna have a bigger population, but they're not necessarily gonna have as large size, they're not gonna have the quality necessarily like you would at Flaming Gorge, and Strawberry. And that's not to say, like, I don't know the situation, like some of you may have your favorite kokanee waters, you're like, oh, those are nice fish. That's not to say that's not the case, it's just their management goal is more opportunity, which is higher catch rates and not as large of a size structure. So, sorry that wasn't super specific, but maybe that helps a little. We have selected a third brood, so that was Fish Lake. What we found though at Fish Lake was those lake trout were pretty hungry. And we're really excited about a new food source. So that's great, that's partly what we do. But that just means that they aren't coming into the trap like we had anticipated and hoped. We are getting eggs from the Fish Lake brood, but it's not as much as we had hoped. So we think we're gonna certify Mill Meadow and move those fish down. There's some predators in there, but not as many. And so maybe we can get them coming in. I guess the brown trout run up to spawn. So that inflow is used by other species, which could be problematic. It's just one of those things where there's just not a lot of options, but we clearly need another brood. We did talk as part of this about a captive brood that has a whole, so that'd be bringing fish in and holding them until they are spawning size and spawning them in the hatchery. And that has a whole nother set of issues that I didn't even think about. Wyoming has captive brood kokanee, and what they do is they can chill or heat raceways. I guess it's raceways, and maybe it's like actual. It might not even be raceways, right? It might be my words are escaping me. The big tanks. And they're chilling water, or cooling, or heating water, basically changing the temperature so that they can make sure that all the fish spawn at the same time. And we don't have the capability to do that. Kokanee are just gonna spawn at all different times. And it does take up a lot more hatchery space. So it doesn't seem like that's an option at this time. But the biologists definitely want us to keep it in the forefront. But like even with Loa coming online next year, like that wasn't what we planned on, right? It was more about somewhere to raise additional native species or more rainbow trout. It wasn't about raising more kokanee. We talked about a strategy for stocking when we have shortages or even when we have excess, right? So sometimes other states have excess, whatever, and they send us fish and vice versa, right? Sometimes we'll get kokanee from Montana, sometimes we'll get grayling from other places. So we definitely like to send fish when we can, but what's that trigger, right? Like how many do we have to where we feel okay about sending fish, or should they maybe go to our waters? The big deal though is if we have a shortage, and we decided to prioritize the brood. So if there's like less than a 10% cut in the quota required, then all the waters that get kokanee would just take that cut evenly. If we start digging down into more than a 10% cut, so we've got less than 90% of our annual quota, then we're probably going to prioritize the brood and give them not their full quota, but a larger chunk, and then whatever's left, basically give it to the regions to divvy up to their highest priority water bodies.
How was it this past fall? It should have been pretty good this year, right?
Yeah, so the Sheep Creek trout did great and got over 2 million eggs. Strawberry and Fish Lake did okay, but didn't, I think we were a little bit short, but it wasn't, no, that's not true. They had excess. White Rocks had excess. So yeah, they got our quotas and they had some excess, but they went out in like February. It was like, so I don't know what kind of survival we can expect, but White Rocks has been having like low water situation. They've been having to get rid of fish pretty quickly. Foundering as well, that's another impact from the drought. Our hatcheries are seeing low water levels, but yeah, so we did good for last year and even some excess into the gorge. But this year, I think nobody knows, right? But we just have to plan for it. We're not gonna get our quota. But we have options potentially, right? If Montana takes enough eggs, we can get, maybe beg and plead with them to try and increase our quota and get close to our quota. And then, we said we wanted to develop a baseline understanding of our kokanee anglers, who they are, how satisfied are they, where do they spend most of their time. So I don't know if any of you saw it, but we did do a survey last fall, and it's just taking forever for me to type up the results with our social scientists and get those out. But we will actually post something on Facebook and share that with folks, because we do appreciate everyone's response. So you'll see who kokanee anglers are, and also what we're gonna do with the information. It was probably what you would expect, right? Most people are going to Strawberry and Flaming Gorge. But over the next few years, I think we're gonna probably try to encourage folks to spread that around and try and go elsewhere and spread out the use. And so, other things that we did with the plan, like I think criteria for evaluating success. It goes back to the management concepts that I talked about, opportunity. What is an opportunity water? Well, you want this kind of a catch rate, you want this proportional stock density, structure, that sort of thing. And so it's given the biologist kind of metrics to evaluate whether or not their fisheries are meeting their what their stated goals are. We set the annual quota. It's just over, I think it's just over 3 million eggs. It's not likely to change much. I think that was probably all. That was the main things I wanted to touch on. So, I will say that we also tried to increase our understanding of the environmental factors that influence kokanee survival to their spawning runs. And even with our biometrician's best efforts, there's just no relation. So when you hear Alan and those guys, the kokanee folks, talk about they're cyclical, and who knows what, like it really, like when you try to put their numbers in the return to the spawn against flows and temperatures, and there's just no relationship that he could pull out. And when he's another smart guy, PhD guy, so when he says that there's no relationship that he can discern, I believe him. So I thought that was interesting. So that kind of changed that aspect of the plan. Maybe we aren't going to understand what's going on in our kokanee fisheries to a T. We're not going to have these wonderful models like we can for other species, but that's okay. We've got other things that we can do, and we'll continue that program. Well, I guess then you probably won't see that grow. But it wasn't for lack of evaluation, it's just not a lot of opportunity. But if someone were to bring something forward and it met all those criteria, we could definitely consider it if there were kokanee available. So, any questions on kokanee?
Thank you.